You're all welcome. We are super excited today. Honestly, when Lorena and I were talking and then meeting these amazing fellows about this topic, it so resonated with us because we know that this is a conversation that we must have. It's a conversation that has been neglected over the years, and it's important that we have it. So today you're going to hear from the perspective of these fellows, amazing fellows here. We have Isidora, we have Raju, we have Alejandro, we have Matthew, and then of course me. So just a bit of introduction. My name is Josephine Nzerem. I'm a fellow. Many years ago, I launched an idea that includes women in decision-making, property rights, and life. So that's what I was doing. Ashoka found me and I became a fellow. And then I'm also a staff. So it's my responsibility to find leading social entrepreneurs all across Africa. So today, you're going to hear from those leading social entrepreneurs. We are going to hear about their perspective in decolonization, indigenization, and reparation. That's what we are going to do today. And you know what? We're going to do something totally different. It's not just our voices. We are going to be inclusive. We also want to hear about your own perspective. So when we do a round, we would like to hear your perspective too. So please open, let's share. And as we share, solutions are emerging. So let's share so that we get those solutions. So I'm just going to go to the fellows now, and they will say 2 sentences about themselves. I don't want to start reading bios and all that. Let it come from them. So let's start with you.
Me?
Yes.
What am I going to say?
Who you are.
Welcome, everyone. Pile in. We have the middle of the floor if you want to get real crazy.
Yeah.
So my name is Matthew Rantanen. I've disguised myself as a Finnish person with my last name. I'm actually Cree from the Alberta region of Canada and near Medicine Hat. And my grandfather came from Finland, so hence the last name. I work with Native American tribes in the United States and Canada sometimes, and I build and educate around building communications infrastructure called the Tribal Broadband Boot Camps. We gather tribes together to get our hands on fiber optics and wireless radios and business plans and sustainability models, and we do 3-day crash course events that are not a conference, very much an interactive space for people to actually tangibly get their hands on stuff. I'll fill in the rest later.
Alejandro. Hello, my name is Alejandro. I spoke in the Totonac language that is spoken in the eastern part of Mexico. I'm the outgoing executive director and founder of the Indigenous Friends Association, the IFA. We are a non-for-profit Indigenous-led organization in Canada that bridges the gap between Indigenous peoples and digital tech. So how Indigenous peoples can get into the tech sector, developing digital skills through learning with traditional knowledge. I'm in the middle of a transition. That is, I'm leaving the organization very strong, in a very strong position, and I'm going to be becoming the executive director of Access Now. This is a global digital rights organization that is working and extending digital rights for communities at risk. On October 1st, with a global team of 140 people in 40 countries. So that is bringing that perspective of what the importance of having this diversity, equity, and inclusion at the global level, and in these institutions around working with digital rights.
Thank you. Isidora.
Thank you. So welcome. My name is Isidora. I'm in the feminist Romani organization, Romani Pen, and also Ini Romnia. This is too. Ini Romnia is not an organization, it's an initiative. And I'm working, or it's not work, it's my life though. So I don't know, more than 30 years, like in our political movements, Romani political movements. And what we do is in the sector of anti-racism, and we do historical work. educational work on history, and a lot of feminist intervention in our organizations. Organizing this
Okay.
in our organizing, and a lot of other things in organizing of the white dominant society. Yes, that's about it.
Thank you, Isidora.
Thank you. Thank you for having me here. Myself, Raju Kendre. I am a first generation student from nomadic community of India, which is historically one of marginalized communities. And 7 years back, I founded a non-profit initiative known as Ecological India Foundation, which works for caste marginalized communities of India, which comprise around 73% population of India, which is not a represented many decision-making spaces like art, culture, law, media, academia, public policy, even development space, not more than single digit. And I am using or breaking this barrier as a higher education as a tool. Myself, I am a first from my family to study higher education, and that is exactly what we are trying to the next generation. And fortunately, platform like Ashoka and many, we got a good success in last 7 years, and I believe that this is just beginning. We have still a long way to go. Thank you.
Thank you. So you can see the fellows in the room. We have the right voices. So after saying that, we are now going to look at systemic change making. How can we drive this? Looking at your own perspective, the indigenous perspective. So Matthew, what do you think?
How can we change?
How can you drive change making and systemic change?
Well, the system is designed not for the Native American community, right? The system is designed for people that are part of the general population, that have access to the resources, that have access to communications, that operate in the normal space, right? So on the reservations in the United States, there's very low connectivity to telephone. Some don't have power, some don't have a roof, many don't have running water, and many don't have high-speed internet. So what we call broadband internet, they don't have access. So to be a change maker in my space, I feel like to be a citizen in the United States of America, you have to have access to these resources. And if they don't have access to these resources, they can continue to be excluded. So the trick is, how do we get the access to the resources? How do we get the communications in the community? The federal government for decades has been incentivizing the incumbent telecommunications providers to, hook up these communities in these rural reservation areas. They have continually found the loophole in the opportunity to take the money, but not deploy the internet. So they're not required to serve 100% of their homes that in their footprint, only 98.5%. 1.5% easily covers the population of the Native American tribes. So they get money to do this over and over and over, and they don't deliver. So finally, don't let a good emergency go to waste, COVID, produce dollars for recovery from that issue. And dollars for the first time have flown directly to tribes, from the federal government to tribes, to be able to serve their communication needs. So what happens, the tribes that are not prepared, or we need information, we need solutions, we need to talk about our community specifically with a group of people that understand this. What a better group of people to do this than tribes that are already building their communications infrastructure. Why go outside of the tribal system? Why not get everybody together and do this? So we've created the Tribal Broadband Bootcamp, and that is to date, we've done 15 events since July of 2021, and we've had over 400 attendees from 72 different tribes in the United States. There's 574 tribes. And we are, aggressively trying to get through the tribes that need access to these resources. And we're building out a network of humans that build broadband infrastructure for their own communities to be able to rely on each other. I am no longer the bottleneck in the conversation where, Matt, who do we talk to about getting information about this thing? Matt, where's the funders at? Matt, where's this? Now I have 400 people that are communicating on Discord. after the events and communicating on a regular daily basis. And they're posing questions to each other and they're answering each other's questions and raising the knowledge level of the entire group. And we're expanding that by more and more events to bring in more and more tribes.
Thank you so much, Matthew. Now, as we listen to the fellows, I want us to also think about solution. Because no matter what happens in our communities, we know that there are people who are cut off from everything. They don't have access. It might not be a tribe. It might be a group of people. So as you are listening to the fellows, think about solution. After today, what am I going to do differently? How am I going to make sure that I'm inclusive in thinking and in action? So please, let's have that in mind as we hear the solutions in the room. So I'm going to go to, what is your own reality in terms of systemic change and in terms of change making? What's your perspective from the Roma community?
Yeah, thank you. So I was listening to Matt, and it's interesting because he's speaking about getting access to infrastructure. And we are also trying to get access, but it's more to epistemology and this history to our own narratives. Really, we also need access to our own history and also to mainstream our testimony and our view, because we are sitting here on the panel about indigenization and colonization. Sorry for my English. I'm trying. And we are sitting at this panel, and the situation for Roma is a little bit another situation than for people who are colonized, because they didn't exploit our territory and our natural resources, but they exploit us as human beings, our ancestors, because we have also a history of slavery, we have a history of serfdom, and they devalued our worldview and our how we imagine the world and how we define, and they devalued our language. They forbid it. We had very strong assimilation periods. That means that they took our children, and you know this story also from another colonial perspective. They gave it for the Christian to educate them. They forbid our language, they forbid our clothes, they forbid marriage between Romani people. They wanted to destroy our existence as a collective, as a people altogether. And what we are doing is taking back the ways how our Romanipe, we call it Romanipe, it's a little bit also a conservative set of rules, but we are decolonizing and de-androcentering it, making it feminine. So this is what we do. And one big problem, because we need to speak in examples, one big problem for us is the last genocide, Roma and Sinti. These are the German Romani people. We survived also the last genocide, and it was not recognized until 1982. And it was a long fight for the recognition. There were radical actions and demonstration, protests, Besetzung. Occupation, and also there were some notes and talk with politicians. So it was not only our own cultural knowledge we used, like oral history and oral testimony, it was also like the mainstream techniques and strategies. I think this is important to say, because we are a very diverse community with a very diverse history, but we had also very diverse techniques. But the resource of social change is like history and is survival. So how we survived over centuries as people to be alive, but also how we survived with our language, with our being, with our worldviews. And this is what we use in our work. And now, it's just 82, they recognized the genocide. And then 2012, they built the memorial. We also fight for years. These are decades of fighting. And now our memorial is endangered again. So, because they want to make a railway station. Okay, I'm talking too much. And just an example what we're doing, for example, At the memorial site, they have no names of Roma, they had no birthdays, nothing. It was only the persecution written at the memorial. So the history of persecution, the Nazi laws, the concentration camps, you could not recognize us as people there. And it was no feeling, it was just like a history book, you know, bam. And like history is objective, neutral, and from the perpetrator's perspective. We made an app, and because we have no museum, we have no resources for an information counter, we made an app and let all people talk about the persecution, our testimonies, and our how we remember is with songs, is with poems. It's more artistic, it's not like the written history books. And this is what we do, and now this app is at the memorial, and it's about 11 to 80,000 people per month. This visiting us, and this is how we try to put into mainstream our narratives and our stories.
Wow, Sidora, thank you so much for sharing. You know, as she was speaking, I was also thinking about where we are now. What are those things that are destroying how we exist? Think about policies, think about the laws that come out. How are we aware and how are we following up? How are we showing up? Because sometimes a policy can just be passed and you find out that you can't exist either in your organization or with your idea. So we need to be really present to follow these things, because you can wake up one morning and find out that a policy has been passed and your organization does not exist anymore. Your idea can no longer operate. So we need to be aware. What are we following up? Let's hear from Raj. So how is change making in your own community? What's your perspective on indigenization from your own local context?
Yeah, like Isidore mentioned, we are 1.5 billion. Now we crossed the China also, India. And we have 3/4 population, like 1.2 billion is historically marginalized community, in which we have constitutional reparation or affirmative, we can say. But still, like nomadic and denotified tribes, like Romania has a history from northern India. Like still India has a 10% population, which is 150 million more than a Deutschland population. Still struggling for their basic existence, intergenerational trauma, systemic oppression. Like we have a criminal tribe act, which still struggling. Like if anything happen in the village or countryside area, if police or administration will went to criminal tribe, like Romani of India, Hamlet. Still that is happening here. What we are trying, like Isidora rightly mentioned, like we our communities, not only nomadic, denotified, Dalit, scheduled caste, scheduled tribe, like the famous book written by caste Isabel Wilkinson, the movie origin directed by Awa, is talking about German, America, and Indian caste system. Like she wrote that book or she directed that film because she have a lived experience. In Indian context, exactly, we don't have, you can't see the artist or director or filmmaker or academician or public policy or even NGO development sector. If you see Ashoka's fellows list, you will see the names. We don't have that representation. We are trying exactly bridge that gap. Like what I inspired me to do this. Once 12 years back, I got dropped out from university education because of my language barriers, because of my cultural barriers. Like you rightly mentioned, the dress code, what you speak, what you eat, you will discriminate on that. And that is we are bridging. And my idea of system change, we want leaders, we want decision making spaces represented from these communities, not like token level, not like just 2, 3, or 5, 10%. We are 75%, we want 75%. And in Indian context, you will see what we are representing our countries or our issue. We are, I am reading a global development space. I studied in SWAT. We are minority across, though we are in terms of population, we are majority. That is the problem we are breaking, and we are using a hierarchical tool. And I believe and our students are going to Harvard or Oxford or Cambridge. That is only single digit, but we want in majority. If we talk about the decolonization is very, again, I will say very biased in terms of marginalized communities. If someone coming from Indian upper caste, upper strata community, they will come outside the country and they will sell their brownness. They will demand a reservation or affirmative action in Deutschland or USA or in UK BAME policy, but they will never criticize what they are owning their rights from thousands years on the controlling the knowledge system or religion. That is the problem, and that is with the decolonization we need the de-Brahmanization in Indian context.
Yes.
That is and that is we are exactly trying to.
Wow, Raj, you just brought an important aspect into the room, to the space. Thank you for that. So Alejandro, I just want to look at the systems that are not exploitative, and how does indigenous knowledge come into practice? And how do you see it in your own context?
Oh, yeah. I think before going into indigenous ways of knowing, it's important to start acknowledging some of the problems and pointing out to the problems. And I think in this context, and very related to what I was mentioned, is the disparities that exist in the global majority and the global minority. We work in a system that, of course, even that is minority, the global minority, they have access to way more resources than the global majority. So how we navigate this politics, how we also acknowledge that we are in Hamburg, in Germany, speaking in English, like we are coming in a privileged position to be here. So how we're decolonizing the space when we are gathering in a certain privileged spaces. So I think this is a question, and you mentioned to be uncomfortable. So with ourselves, how we are really decolonizing the space, how we are having these conversations in other geographies, in other contexts, and facilitating this. And when we are talking about indigenous knowledge, it's about that, is how we can start bringing these local ways and indigenous ways into the knowledge systems. So it might not be in a framework in Germany in English, it might be in a local community, in the countryside, in the global majority. So that is the question. I don't know how people will feel comfortable to go to those spaces and adapt to those type of ways of knowing. And part of what we are doing within the organization is digital tech that is very aligned to Western's ways of knowing, and in a very particular way of always creating profit, how actually they can learn from indigenous ways of knowing, of trying to be more connected to the community values and being connected more to the land. Because we need to remember that digital technologies are creating a lot of pollution and creating and adding a lot to the climate change crisis. So it's so important to bring the indigenous ways of knowing when we are creating these type of solutions and bringing these perspectives into design. But I think I want to leave an open question for everyone. Are we willing to have the uncomfortable conversations? Because that means that we need to deconstruct ourselves. We need to de-learn what we learn and actually to start creating different ways of learning. And these institutions as universities and colleges, we need to deconstruct them and to have uncomfortable conversations. Are we willing to have an elder, a knowledge keeper as a professor at the same level? Without a PhD, it's not going to be about a PhD. It's about life experience.
Exactly.
Are we ready for those type of conversations? Of course, like when we are in a space like this, everyone is yes, let's do it. But when we go to the institutions in the decision making, is when no, let's talk. We need to talk with the different levels of bureaucracy, and it never happens. So I think it's important to be used to have uncomfortable conversations. And also in the decision making, are we really being diverse in the decision making? Because commonly in the organizations, in the institutions, we have a diverse, but just in the bottom line. But what about in the decision making? Are we willing to give up power to those people? Are we willing to allow those decision making positions to be really diverse and to create an equal space? That is an uncomfortable conversation that's so many times people are not willing to have.
Okay, thank you very much, Alejandro. So we'll come to you.
Can I add to that?
Okay, add to that.
We have the opportunity as, and I hate the word expert, but because I'm always learning, I'm learning from everyone. But we have the opportunity, because we get brought in as experts in this topic to speak at these institutions. And we are sort of afforded the opportunity to speak at the level of an instructor. So let's break them down at that level.
Yeah.
Let's present what needs to change while we're speaking to them, while they've invited us in to talk about that, so that we can deconstruct some of that live and in front of them.
Yeah.
Before we become professors without a
Professors,
PhD.
yes.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you, Matthew. So I'm opening the floor now before we come back to us. So how are you, after this experience, going to start having those uncomfortable conversations? And spaces where you will have them? Is there any brave person that wants to share with us? I want a brave hand up.
I'll tell you.
You.
He's brave.
My I'm Indigenous people from Woodland. That's right there. And my grandmother was taken away and given to a Christian, like a Catholic piece of people in it. And so that part of the whole thing is thing. So, but what she did was she was part of the Socialist Party, and she pushed hard both sides of my family growing up. I grew up with this idea of cooperation. Anyway, so what we do is we give people the right to own infrastructure and communally own it. And through that work for the years with my organizations, we've done that. But the point is that now I'm in a position of power where you say infrastructure is where you have to go, and the financial leverage you get by working with infrastructure is very apparent in meetings. They don't care about the backstory.
Right.
The truth of the matter is there's not a big bad guy who's white with saying stabbing people like with a big drooling thing, this monster like bank man. They're usually just so short-sighted.
Yeah.
So what I'm doing and what I do is I'm working with policymakers and heads of councils and local authorities and saying, this business case is a business case for love, and it's cooperation, and we encourage you to be a part of this, and it'll hit all your CSR targets, but it will make you money, and we know that's what you want. So we will do that, and we can do it collaboratively. So I that's what I do, and that's what I would encourage everybody else to do, is build the project and have someone who makes it literacy around, this is financially valuable, but make sure that the business case for love is still there.
Thank you. Any other brave person? Okay.
I started together with my husband, an organization delivering healthcare using transport for the most remote communities in Africa, in 4 African countries. And in 1996, we made sure that the leadership and the management were all from the nations in which that this was taking place. And we're at a point now, and that's built, and the leadership is fantastic. I know that you've met one of our leaders in Lesotho, and they are all run and managed by those nations. But one of the things they've found very difficult is to have the language and attitudes to let them have a voice on the global health community. And if the people like UN and WHO don't change their attitudes, it's really going to be really slow. And I've even talked to the big agencies like UNICEF and Save the Children Fund, and they're still in 2024 really wedded to the idea of having people go from developed countries to those countries. And we need to make sure, the people who are doing those jobs on the ground have that voice and know how to manage those conversations.
Yeah.
So that,
Thank you so much. Thank you. So we'll come back again. Now we are looking at how is changemaking a tool? How is it a tool in the terms of decolonization and indigenization? How is it a tool? So Matthew?
So it is a very important tool. Communication infrastructure allows the community to be a participant in the greater space that they live in. So voting is a big one, especially this round.
Mhm.
Yes, we learned.
Yes.
Did we not learn? Did somebody learn? Please say we learned. Voting is a big one, right? But education, online resources to education, to job development, to telecommuting. A lot of our folks can't, may have one car per family household if they have a car, but they could easily perform a job online if they had access to broadband, right? And some of those solutions exist only in urban areas or suburban areas that have access to broadband. So these rural communities getting access to the communications is a tool in being an operative in the space that we live in today. But it's also a tool for the tribal government to be able to be more self-controlling or self-governing and independent from the relationship with the federal government of the nation, both US and Canada. I think if you look at them similarly, they have independence and autonomy. They do have a relationship with the federal government and they rely on some resources, but as communication opportunities come into those communities, which is one of the key factors in holding them back from economic development, from furthering their education and searching for jobs that are in their communities and finding solutions for water filtration and finding solutions for management of sewage and trash resources and things like this. There's a wealth of knowledge that they don't have or access to. So this is opening all of those doors and it's allowing the tribal governments to be more independent, less dependent on the federal government when they've failed to support those communities that they've created with these reserves and reservations. So I think it's a very crucial tool right now to be able to have an independent community and a self-sustaining community where they have previously been a dependent scenario.
Okay, Isidore, how is change making a tool in your own community when you are looking at decolonization and indigenization?
Yes, maybe also I can answer to you because you said it's not the big white person. I think history is to be aware of history is a very important tool. If you do system analysis, you start with history. If you want to understand how we are connected with each other globally, you start with history because the things they didn't happen now. They have a tradition and things change and so on. But I think history, to understand and analyze history, is a very important tool for us. I mean, we work in this field, so.
Yeah.
Okay, and the other thing is really to name things. We have a divided society, a global divided society. This is something what is real. We can not talk about it, but it is real. And we have to take it into account when we plan everything we do. We have to take account that there is a division, and if you want to connect people and if you want to create something, you must somehow, how you say, get the whole, or yes, you must go into reparation, you must, if you don't do it, we have the situation, and Matt was talking about this also, how people get a lot of money. We call this with the slur, but I don't use the slur, we call it like Romani industry. Okay. Because they were sent millions and millions on European level, and I don't know. And the millions got some organization who made big promise and they didn't do nothing. And the result was that Romani people are not disciplined enough, that we are not working enough, because it was like on individual ideas of we have to learn hygiene, we have to learn how to use techniques, for example, and so on. But it didn't came from the community, and they didn't support our community leaders, and they even didn't know our structures. They wouldn't know to go and to speak to. So that this industry, that there were some people, I mean, we can say about church, there's a lot to say, but the church, they have more contact to the people than this paid social entrepreneurs and I don't know who get money to do things. So this is like when you speak about tools or our tools, this is the contact with people. This is like to see history, to reclaim history, to speak openly and to risk white fragility. This Nick, you sent us a video. Nick.
Yeah.
Yes, he said, okay, you must risk white fragility, but if you want to go for it, you need some self-reflection and then go on. And then really to give the position and the structures to people.
Yeah.
And that means
own it.
to bring people also to academia, of course, to the university and to support them and to step back and not to help all the time.
Yeah.
We don't need help anymore.
Let
We
them
helped
be.
enough. So give people the
Yeah.
possibility to help themselves.
Exactly. So, empowerment is one word, is a buzzword now. Everybody uses it. Empowerment, empowerment, empowerment. But basically, how are we ensuring that every human being is powerful? Powerful to take that decision that matters to them, matters to their community, and let them be as they are taking that decision. And do not dictate how that decision or how that collaboration should look like. Let them be the ones to design and implement it. Let there be ownership. Because if there's no ownership, the money is just flying around because that's what is happening here, because there's no ownership. So now, what in your own community, how has changemaking been a tool when you are looking at decolonization and indigenization? How has it been a tool for you?
Yeah, first of all, I will say, like from last 1 decade, personally, as a community member or a so-called a social entrepreneur or leader, we say my problem is in development space or policy space to recognize a problem there is a systemic problem as a caste. That is my huge challenge. Hence, I use a scientific tool like a research and I am collaborating with many faculties and scholars for them. But the last level I will talk, we have intergenerational trauma.
Okay.
We have thousands years history. We are untouchables. We are once upon a, we don't have a control over the knowledge. That is, we have to break, like by change making, if you see the large systemic change, intergenerational trauma, the socio-economic, cultural mobility. People still criticizing the affirmative action quota system or reservation, which is only for 2% public jobs. 90%, 98% are still private jobs in India. They don't have a reservation. The same people coming, like as I mentioned, same people going to USA are demanding affirmative action as a brown who are owning the country from thousands years in India. That is my and like we have, like you rightly mentioned, we have a cultural history. We now some 2-3 directors or filmmakers are doing very great job in India, which are writing their own history. They are presenting their own history. That is gatekeep from the thousands years. We have our own unique culture. We have our own food culture. We have our own art culture. But that never mainstream. That never happened mainstream. That is my definition. Like I can say my own understanding. Whatever I am the junior to these people, but whatever I learned. And the practical problem is to recognize the problem and work on that.
Yeah.
And don't be savior. Give the space to marginal leadership and give support them. And many platforms are doing that at a global level. But yeah, India has a long way to in terms of recognizing caste and work on that practically.
Yeah, but you are working on that.
Yeah, I am a competent.
Thank you. All right, so Alejandro, let's look at, from your own perspective, the unique and different things about change making in terms of the value of the strategies for decolonization and indigenization.
I think I have 3 clear strategies. One is around, and I learned this from community, changing the language. And then you already mentioned one, empowerment. We are not empowering communities. Communities, they have their own power.
Power.
Yeah.
So
Simple.
when we say we are empowering women, we're no, they like,
They have
we
their
need to
power.
recognize, so we already banned that word from all our documents. No empowerment, everyone has their own power. But also, be clear, we are not talking about developed and developing countries. We are not talking about the first world versus the third world. We are talking about the majority versus minority. It's just about the quantity. And how we are start using this language can affect a lot of the decision making and how we are looking at the other. And this is an uncomfortable conversation because that means that you need to go and check all your documents and change your missions and change your visions and change the policy. And
Yeah.
this creates a lot of discomfort and people feel uncomfortable to have those conversations. First, second is with capacity building. And I have seen a lot of, and especially in the non-for-profit sector, oh, we want to hold the knowledge. We want to be the ones teaching the community about X, Y, Z. No, why we are not creating capacity building at the local level in order for them to decide how they want to
Yes.
create their own solutions. But that means to give up power. And oh my God, now we are not indispensable. We are not the saviors anymore. So what is our mission then? Because they need to rely on us. So are we willing to have that conversation internally with our staff, with our board members? The board members, oh, imagine. Guys, we are not saving Africa anymore. Like, oh my God, what are we gonna do with our life? So I like, this is an uncomfortable situation.
Yeah.
And we're laughing because we are very close to that.
Yeah.
We are very close to that.
So true.
And then to be advocates, I think all of us, when we get to a position of power, is how we are open doors. I wouldn't be talking to you today if others, my mentors, wouldn't have open spaces for me. So are you willing to give that space to others? When you are in a university lecture, when you are in front of people, are you willing to give up that space to others to come in and to bring their perspectives? Wow. So I'm not gonna be the spotlight. No, you are not. So this is a little bit of the uncomfortable conversations. And I learned this from community. So many times, and an elder told me, Alejandro, you just need to keep quiet and listen. Yeah,
Me
true.
too.
Yeah, keep quiet.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's part of now what I'm trying to practice. Yeah, to listen, really.
Yeah. You know, he brought us something that got me thinking, recognizing the stories.
Yeah.
You see, we are who we are
Yeah.
today because of the shoulders that we are standing on,
Yes.
the people that came before us. So if those people gave us power, how are we giving power to others? You know, we have to break this savior mentality, break the spotlight mentality. Everyone is powerful, and let's bring that power into the room. All of us sitting here, we all have our power. And in having that power, you have your special quality that is unique. And bringing all that together makes all of us powerful. But if you are having the spotlight mentality, we are not going to get anywhere. So, but having that in mind, we are now going to move in to another aspect of this discussion, which is reparation. And you know that reparation is something that people don't want to talk about.
It's expensive.
It's expensive, it's difficult, it's, you know, but we have to really talk about it. What does it mean to us? How do we feel about reparation? So, are we accomplices or are we allies? Right?
I already touched your topic there. I know couple of years back, one of my friend, he was like very close with me and coming from privileged background.
Speak louder.
Yeah, sorry. Coming from privileged background and he also run an organization which supports a scholarship, and he supports some students, some partial scholarship, and and I just use don't be a savior. Like we had a debate and we just use the word don't be a savior. Like we don't, like we are supporting 100 of students per year, we don't never use the word like we are documentation, you please email and give the receipt and don't be severe. We are supporting it. And he got uncomfortable with that and he cut down the relation with me from that. And that is and I observed that like many people in Indian context, like when I was following Black Lives Matter movement in America. Many white people gone on knee, like they have that white guilt, we say. But India, like we talk about reparation. I know the famous orator Shashi Tharoor, you might know. He gave the talk in Oxford Union on reparation, how British colonize and how reparation. But Indian own people who are controlling the knowledge system from 1,000 years, we never discuss that reparation. They owe the reparation, but they not recognize the problems still. That is like my broad understanding, and many people from they are still like that, like what we talking about African countries here. Indian context, like people are like that in charity approach. Still, they will go on street, distribute food or distribute some pen, notebook, but they will not talk about the real change making or so-called empowerment. That is the point, and I will say many supporters in even in my process of Ashoka. Subhashish, who was my mentor, he's coming from. He acknowledged his privilege, and he gave the space to others. But 90+% that is not case in India. People are controlling their narrative. People are controlling the resources. And I will explicitly mention, for me, allyship is okay, but don't be control our narrative. Don't be a voice of our narrative, because you will again use the language of like charity or empowerment.
Okay. Thank you so much. So, Isidora, when you look at reparation, how do you see it, especially in terms of becoming ally or an accomplice? What does it mean to you in your own community?
Okay, so reparations, we had big discussions about reparation after the Second World War, after the genocide. So it is also big unjust question, but a lot of survivors didn't got any reparations. Some countries got reparations, but it was not clearly for Roma. And a lot of forced laborer they got, but they also didn't got. So it's a very complicated case. I don't know if I'm understandable. Like, for example, for forced labor, German industry, they came together and then they built a foundation and they gave the money to the foundation and then they are clean. They don't have to pay anymore the people who worked for their profit. Yes, and the foundation, they are giving money to for projects. That means, for example, Nazi granddaughter can make a nice project about remembrance culture, she'll get money. I'm debating this route, but this is how it is, yes? So, and they're doing projects, so. And we are also doing projects, and for example, this is also interesting because in my community, we discuss very much the things. And there are a lot of people, they told we cannot ask for money from this foundation because they didn't pay our people. And the other side said, they took the money from the individuals. And the other side said, we need to work with this money because we have to, it is ours. And we are the grandchildren. So it was a big discussion. I think we discussed really about 5 years if we will go to this foundation and take money or not. The decision was yes. Now we are doing also remembrance. So yes, but I mean, my grandfather was forced labor and never get compensation. So what was the question about? Reparations. I'm on the line. Reparations. Yes. So I wanted to say it's complicated, and also we didn't have one Romani organization who got the reparations. Yes, it was with us. It was another thing. It was a Gaja non-Roma organization who had to give the reparations to people. So it was a very bad thing. However, so what we discuss now on the German level, we had a commission. It's like commission against, I say against racism and against racism of Roma and Sinti. And this commission, we also wrote the biggest study for this commission. They gave, we wrote some studies, they had 15 studies. And then the result was that they will make a truth and reconciliation commission now from the next year. And now it's just like, they don't call it anymore Truth Commission, but it should be a commission for the second persecution. We call the persecution after 45.
Okay.
Because it went on the second persecution. And a commission for reconciliation. And then they want like to make some reparations to the grandchildren, but now it's only discussed on the German level. That means the European genocide is not in their view.
Yeah.
So there is a really political discussion about this reparations. But for me, for example, we never tried. My grandfather and also my other family members, they never asked for reparations. And for me, it is like reparation would be, I told you our memorial is endangered now, and you're all invited when we're talking about allies and complices.
Yes.
You can decide what you want to be. On the 28th of September, we are making a big demonstration in Berlin, so come join us. Against the damaging of our memorial, which was only 10 years. This would be for me reparation.
Yes.
To keep our culture, to keep the remembrance, and also what you're talking about, to give access to university, to faculty on a systemic level. Because we have a lot of programs, maybe you don't know, in Germany, for assistant, like for school mediators and so on, for unqualified jobs. But we don't have these projects and programs for qualified jobs, to put Roma into academia and so on. And this is something we should change, like make these programs and so on. I mean, we have a lot of ideas, but this would be real reparation, like to change the system and to really fight against racism. This would be for me an accomplice to make it your own thing. Because now also we have in Saxony and Thüringen this right-wing party. And of course, everybody can theoretically say how bad it is for the democracy, but certain people are at risk. It's not just bad for us theoretically. And we cannot speak today how bad it is and tomorrow go to the sea to make some nice sunbath and swim in the sea because we are afraid for our lives. So, and if you're an accomplice, you should also know when you go to swim in Thüringen, that you are privileged to do so. So be an accomplice, change, take risk, take yourself a risk. So, and also we have to take risk for other people. I'm not like saying, oh, no, we all have to take risk if we're honest. Okay.
Thank you.
Here, like just one point.
Okay.
Adding to it, like in India also, we have many schemes, many policies, which are again creating the hierarchy system, like providing skills programs for becoming just a minimal worker on that. But you don't have that programs to become a bureaucrat or policymaker or administrator or development leader. That is a very systemic structure again. Because the policymakers are again that side.
You're on the other side. And that's why we must get them to be on that side. All right. So Alejandro, how do you see reparation? And how are you?
Okay, Isidora, you actually reminded me, set me up. You reminded me of a very important point that is going to be my second point. First, the first point in the context of Canada, in 2008, the Prime Minister Harper, before Trudeau, that probably many of you know who he is, previously he was a conservative Prime Minister. He provided an apology. What does that mean, an apology about a genocide, right? So the Truth and Reconciliation Commission started like bringing up all the crimes against Indigenous peoples in Canada. And in 2017, the report was released with 94 calls to action. So that was a call for all levels of society, citizens, governments, enterprises, citizens, to be part of the reconciliation part. And that's why Trudeau used a lot of that in his campaign about reconciliation with Indigenous peoples and about reparations. What does that mean? And from a standing point of view, inviting the entire society of being part of that, of those reparations. And reparations are not just financially, reparations are about the system, about creating a space for people to be part of. That has been also part of the call for our non-for-profit also to bring people within our organization from different backgrounds, because one thing is just to say, oh yes, we're inviting Indigenous peoples to apply for the job, but it's something very different is to take out the requirements, like, post-secondary education, that is a very big barrier for Indigenous peoples in Canada. So taking out that requirement and also acknowledging the life experiences that they have in order for them to be part of the organization. So that's one side of reparations that I think that is for historical reparations. But I am gonna take Isidora for my second point, that is about taking risk and also acknowledging reparations and not historical, what is happening right now in Gaza and Palestine, and we're not talking about it, and the reparations that need to happen now because infrastructure has been destroyed, human rights have been violated, and what are we doing about it? And I think to acknowledge that is also part of, now it's not a historical point anymore, it's now, it's happening now, and it's live streaming for the first time in social media, live streaming, you can see what is happening. And this is gonna become worse and worse, like in the future, any other conflict is gonna be live streaming in front of us. You're gonna be you're gonna be like watching a movie or live in your TV. So now you cannot be just neglecting what is happening, we need to be, so how we can become actively part of those reparations.
So I'm gonna play devil's advocate for a second. How much money is enough for reparations?
How much?
Can they pay for what happened for the
No.
genocide? Can they pay for all the lost,
No.
history, culture, people,
No.
land, resources? I mean, so how do you put a price tag on that? Where does it start? Where does it end? Does it ever end? How do you integrate back into this society? Because this society is not gonna leave, for the Native American population in North America. So how do you be a part of that? Well, we're still fighting the battles of spectrum over tribal lands to be able to use for broadband, resources, for cellular communications, for, a number of different reasons. They were still fighting for those basic rights of water that flow across the reservation that can be dammed outside the reservation and no longer flow, right? We're still fighting all those battles of putting our land into trust, right? You pay out of your pocket to buy land adjacent to your reservation, to add it to your existing space. It's a multi-year process, if they even grant it, to be able to get that into your federal landmass that is recognized as a sovereign space. So, we have a multitude of battlefronts to engage on a daily basis, not even a yearly basis, but a daily basis. We're fighting the Federal Communications Commission for access to the things that we should have access to anyway. We have a Band-Aid solution in that scenario, which is called the tribal priority window, which we've gotten them to apply 2 different times to spectrum allocations so that we can get access to federal licenses for spectrum. That's one little piece of the puzzle, right? So then you have water situations, and then you have pipelines cutting through the tribal land that, that land is supposed to be tribal, it's supposed to be sacred, it's supposed to be respected. No, but the power of oil is greater than that. And the power of uranium is greater than that, because the White Mountain Apache just lost a portion of their reservation during the Obama administration of all things, right? You think that we would have somebody with a little bit darker skin tone be on our side and fight this kind of stuff with us. No, that still is the power of uranium, the power of oil, the power of industry that still supersedes, the power of those people. So I don't know if I'm an accomplice or if I'm an ally. I think I like to think that I'm on the allied side and learning how to take a bite out of that, but I don't know what the answer is. And I don't speak for any specific tribal government. I'm not allowed to because I'm not a tribal elected official. But I do speak at the National Congress of American Indians on behalf of Tech and Telecom, and I've been vetted by 260 member tribes to be able to talk on certain subject matters. And I can tell you that they don't have an answer either at the National Congress of American Indians. Individual tribes have things that would solve their local scenarios and problems, but as a tribal community as a whole, we don't have an answer for that. And I don't see a way to recover the loss. So what is the status change that needs to happen moving forward? And that's a complex problem. And I was always told by the tribal leaders that I worked for, do not walk in this room with a problem if you don't also carry a solution.
Yeah.
Well, this is one I don't have an actual answer for, a solution, so.
I totally agree, because how do you cleanse tears of many years? How do you deal with trauma of many years? How do you deal with hurts of families that were separated? How do you deal with that? People that have been scattered, their lands, everything lost. Is it possible to roll the time backwards and bring it all together? No. Because if we really want to look at reparation, that means that we are looking at how do we bring things back, but it's not going to be. So what we should look at now, going forward, what are the things we can do that will make the existence of these communities better? How do we acknowledge their power and make sure that their voices are in the decision-making spaces, that they are no more left behind? That's what we should be thinking about now. So I'm still going to come back to you and ask, what is that one thing that if it changes, your community will just flourish, begin to flourish? Matt, what's that one thing?
It's gonna sound weird. So we are technically classified in the United States as sovereign dependents to the federal government. Let's have sovereign independence. Take the dependency away. And the reparations there can be the federal government making that community right, financially, resource-based, whatever the case may be, based on that relationship. We solve that one out of 574, solve them one at a time, and let those tribes be independent sovereigns where they can buy land and convert it to trust on their own. They can do the things that they need to do to operate and function as an independent government.
Interesting.
Well, it's very similar because it's in the context of Canada, and very similar to the United States with certain differences. But I think that a sovereignty piece, and I will add on top of that, the Indigenous data sovereignty piece, how important now with the digital spaces and how we continue extracting things from local communities and Indigenous communities in order to create profit, and how universities, colleges, they continue profit from this knowledge. And this has happened for centuries. It's not something new with the digital. It's something that has happened over and over and over again in a lot of ethnicities in Africa, how they have been being extracted over and over again. So how we can have real Indigenous data sovereignty, and how we can actually start creating control and ownership, stewardship over that information. And especially now with the social media and with everything digital, how we can have that sovereignty over our data.
Okay.
And in that vein, really fast,
Okay.
the Arizona State University is the highest number of Native Americans in higher education. It's 5,500 undergrads and 500 grad students, I think. And the National Congress of American Indians this year announced a Center for Tribal Digital Sovereignty, including data sovereignty, but also the infrastructure delivery system, the management and storage system of that data, and the traffic and controlling that traffic so it is not obtained by others. So,
Okay.
yeah, so.
We're getting there. Isidora.
If I have to choose one, I take citizen rights.
Citizen rights.
Freedom of movement and citizen rights.
Yeah.
Yeah, I already gave the context. But it's hard to choose one point because we are again the largest population and most marginalized population, I can say. 1.2 billion. 75% of Indian total population are historically underrepresented. One point I will say that across all decision-making spaces, equal representation. If you talk today, media, Oxfam official reports say not a single % representation from Dalit, Adivasi, Indigenous, nomadic, identified tribes community are represented in mainstream media. Not even editor, journalist also. Same academia means, if you are aware about Indian education system, IIT, IIM are dominant institution. Not again 5% academician from this 75% community. Again, NGO, we use across all decision. If you talk big NGOs, big development sector, policy makers, if you see the bureaucracy who runs the all political system, not again single person representation. Art, culture, you can't see the directors, filmmakers across all bits. All decision making spaces, I want, like that is my like one point I will say, we need an equal distribution across all decision making spaces that can be starting of the change making.
Exactly, breaking the silos.
Yeah.
The quota system, those decisions that just separates people. Okay, thank you so much. Now we are open for questions. What do you see and how can you collaborate to change these narratives? What do you see? Yes?
Hello, everybody. Thank you so much. This is very thought-provoking. The last question particularly got me a little bit worried because if we ask about change that we want to see that we don't control, it's wishful thinking in a way, because the people that can make those kind of changes are not usually in this kind of discussion centers. So even if we take a quick census now, the number of pure Caucasians in this room will be far less than those in other rooms. So my question, I think, and as we were talking, I was also wondering about that. All these issues are an issue of human nature. Majority always oppresses minority. It doesn't have to do with color of skin or religion. Everywhere you go, the majority does the same thing. If you come to Nigeria, we're all Black, but in every region, the majority oppresses the minority. And I'm wondering,
Minority.
South Africa, minority oppressing a majority.
Yeah.
oh yes, no, but that's a global kind of problem because it came from colonization. And colonization is a wealth transfer thing. Yes, so there were majority in terms of money, control of resources, power, and long-term history. So my question I'm wondering is, in my own circle or our own circle individually, if it's a circle of 5, where you are the majority, what could you do different for the minority in your circle? And I'm looking at the fellows here, especially the Indigenous fellows. I'm going like Matt, is there a white Caucasian in your organization that doesn't have power, that you treat differently from the way others? Do you have white Caucasians in your group? So they can learn, they can understand on a physical level what it means to be in the minority. And also we as humans can learn, how do we treat the minority that we have control over? What can we do differently? Or do we run our own exclusive club and go like, yeah, we're the minority, we've suffered, we've done all this, and they are the enemy, they don't have access to us. So maybe if we can start changing from our little circles, no matter how small it is, let's invite one minority person to be part of that same work and see, maybe we change, maybe they go back to their communities and go like, we need to change. I don't know, that's my question.
Yeah.
So
Well, we have many non-tribal people in the organization that are very functional and very instrumental in the success of organizations. And my partner in the tribal broadband boot camps is a white guy, white bread toast. And St. Paul, Minnesota, white as it gets. And he is you know, self-proclaimed, I don't know enough about Native American culture. I'm learning as I go. You know, please forgive me and educate me along the way, but very much an equal in this space, very, you know, in the technical space and in the policy space and the, you know, business development space, very
You're
much.
a Black person.
Not in the tribal broadband boot camps, they're very, very small organization, there's 3 of us. And then in the organization that is Tribal Chairman's Association that I work with, there are Black, Chinese, white, and a number of different ethnic backgrounds, and all treated as equals. But I would say some tribes are more racist, if you will, against those people than the tribes that I've worked for. The tribes in Southern California are very open-minded and understand that knowledge is knowledge and people are people and embrace all types of people. There are tribes that are very extreme perspective that we've been treated wrong by every culture, so we're going to keep it that way, you know, keep it tribal. And they'll hire other tribal people, but they won't hire other non-tribal people. You know, that's a preference. And I don't understand because I agree with the tribes that I've worked with for the last 23 years. They're very open-minded about, you know, learning from others and bringing in others and being a part of that through the strengthening communities.
Like she mentioned South Africa, a minority, but if you go to the Black South Africans, the majority of South Africans still treat the Black foreigners, minorities, in not too nice space. So I keep wondering, is it a human nature thing, or are there some races that are more racist?
All right, let's hear from
There's a
that side.
greed problem.
Yeah,
I
this-
think you
yeah.
can't
That's human.
also rely on humans. I don't like, it's interesting, I would love to hear from you, because I think this is something that you can't rely on human beings.
No.
Because those that have experienced the oppression suffer from long-term trauma.
Yeah.
And trauma responses manifest differently.
Exactly.
I mean,
Yes.
I'm from South Africa, and I mean, I'm a Zimbabwean living in South Africa, and I see it, I've lived there. But I don't think it's as simple as now it's our turn, and there are systemic issues that
Yeah.
create this, you know?
Mm.
So I don't think you can rely on humans. You know, you have to have a system,
Mhm.
because humans will be infallible. We can't, you know, like, and I think, no, we can't remove racism or caste or, you know, in people's minds or, you know, but you can make sure that the system at least does not oppress.
Yes.
Yeah.
Which I'm curious, like, how do you change that, those incentives? You talk about, you know, the challenges you are facing and your hope that, you know, changing the representation will change. In many ways, sometimes it doesn't.
Yeah, I agree.
So how do you change, you know, like
Yeah.
the systems so that at least everyone has
Enjoys.
a
has
fair,
a
you know,
free-
has
yeah.
equality in the law, and, you know, that it doesn't really matter
Yeah.
on an interpersonal.
Yeah.
Because I think he also mentioned that, you know, there aren't like, maybe, you know, like these devil-looking people, but the system creates
Them.
but I mean, they are there, we know people can be very, you know,
They need to be unmasked.
we can't really, you know, like, you can't really change that. But how do we change the system that everyone at least is recognized as equal?
Yeah.
So that you can then say, as a system, what do reparations look like?
Yes.
Right? Because in South Africa, there's a book that was written, it's called Apartheid, Guns and Money. And what that book does is it documents all the people that were involved during apartheid and how they are thriving post-apartheid, because the systems allow them to continue to move that. So how do we actually address from a systemic perspective?
We have 4 more
Those
minutes
challenges.
left, so I'd like to hear from both of you before we round this up. And then we can have the conversation afterwards. It continues. You know, it doesn't end
Yeah.
today.
So I'll kind of set him up I'll do a tribal thing and then a Mexican thing.
Yeah.
So there are two dynamics that happen that are human greed that we see. And one of them is Native Americans that get economic development. So let's call it a casino because everybody understands casino, right? But it can also be green energy, it can be forestry, it can be resources of another nature. But you have economic development, and the federal government has imposed an enrollment structure that is, you have to be 1/4 from this tribe and have lived here since eternity, whatever. And so that's the rule, and we adopted it stupidly. We haven't changed it, also stupidly, not fixed the problem and opened the enrollment to everybody that is a descendant. So when the money comes in, then they share the money with the individual members. And at that point in time, there is no one in the voting membership of that tribe that will allow the enrollment to open up for the rest of the community to get money. So they don't want to open the enrollment because it's going to dilute their check. So same dynamic, Mexican people that have made it across the border, that have become American citizens, are voting against other Mexican people to come across the border and become American citizens. What the F?
Yeah.
I don't understand either dynamic, but that is human greed.
Yeah.
That's human nature.
I don't have the solution for this systemic issue, but I can tell you what we are trying to do within the organization. Because what happened to me is I'm originally from Mexico and I'm working with First Nations. So I encountered a lot of what Matthew was saying, like why you are doing this work with us if you are from Mexico. And I was like, well, Turtle Island is how it was called North America. So I was like, I'm part of Turtle Island. No, not part of this part of Turtle Island, you are part of that part. Anyway.
You're a foot, you're not a shell.
Yeah. So you are not part of this. So it has been very interesting because within the organization, we have Black people, brown people, we have a lot of immigrants, even refugees working within the organization, a lot of Indigenous as well. So how we're having this conversation, because at some point it was like a competition. I have had more trauma than you. Like my ancestors who went through way more than yours. And it's like competition of like colonization of what is going on. And I think it was about to first recognize that we are all affected. And it's not a competition, it's we are all affected, and we are, with our differences, we can bring solutions.
Yeah.
Other perspectives. So you might differ on my way of thinking, but let's bring it together. Let's create that space when we might differ. And of course, that creates a little more of creating the space. There is gonna be discomfort because now I cannot make this decision faster. I need to open the space for more dissonance within the organization. But it's fine, it's like part of being diverse.
Yeah.
And also, it's not that we are creating a perfect system. So many times we are like overseeing things, and sometimes it's to recognize, hey, I made a mistake not to consult all of you because this is affecting you, and recognizing from a decision-making, from a privilege of power, saying, I made a mistake. You are totally right. I didn't see this, like this thing, this perspective. Yeah, and I think we have learned a lot. And now, especially in digital spaces, we are all coming together from all the world at the same time in the same spaces. We need to have these conversations. We cannot be, oh, we're just from one community. Non-for-profits, maybe 30, 40 years ago, they were focused in local communities. Now they are global, and we need to recognize the difference and how we can bring value being different.
Yeah, thank you so much. Our time is up, but I just want you to really acknowledge these powerful people in the room. I really want us to thank them for coming out with their whole self, not holding back, sharing their stories. And then as we go, we also think about, as we break down everything, how we're building the system that will enable everyone to flourish and thrive. Thank you so much.